There's loads of absolutely brilliant plants you can grow for wildlife in your garden. And to be honest, as long as you've got a really good wide range of different flowers, you can't go wrong. I've made a little posy here of some of the flowers growing in my garden at the moment. We've got this lovely cranesbill geranium, which has got really nice open flowers that the bees love to visit. We've got mountain cornflower here, which is really good, another really good bee plant. We've got buddleia here, which is also known as butterfly bush because the butterflies love to land on the flowers and then dip their tongue into each individual floret. It smells really good too. We've got ruddy clover, which has got this really lovely tall stem, which is really good for bees. And because it's in the clover family, it's got really good high quality pollen, which is really good for bee grubs in the nest. And then this is one of my favourites. You don't often see it in gardens. It's called hemp agrimony, and it's one of the best butterfly plants you can grow. But it's also really, really good for bees, hoverflies, all types of fly. So that's a really amazing insect magnet that you can grow in your garden. Some plants aren't as good for wildlife, and indeed some of them can even harm wildlife. So I'm going to take you through some of these plants that you should avoid growing in your garden. The first type of plant to avoid growing in your garden is double flowered plants. These can often be roses or they can be begonias like we've got here. And they're called double flowered because they've been bred to have so many extra petals that you can't see the centre of the flower. Now the centre of the flower, that's where all the pollen and nectar is. That's where the bees go to get their food, to feed themselves and their young. So the more double flowered plants we grow in our gardens, there could be loads of pollen and nectar in those blooms, but if the bees can't see or access that pollen and nectar, they may as well not be there at all. So what we need to do as gardeners, if we're going to help the bees and help other pollinators, is to grow as many single flowered plants as possible. And those are plants where you can see the centre of the flower, and so bees can visit to get the pollen and the nectar available. The second type of plant to avoid growing in your garden is a bedding plant. Lots of bedding plants have been overbred in order to flower for a long time, to be resistant to drought and diseases, and over that time what's often been bred out of the flowers is the potential to feed pollinators, so they have very little pollen and nectar available. What's more, a lot of them just simply aren't suitable for British pollinators. This impatiens here, it's a very attractive plant. It's got these lovely big pink flowers, but it's a tropical plant. It's been designed to be pollinated by tropical pollinators. And so bees and butterflies in the UK can't access this flower. It's just not the flower shape needed for them to access and get the pollen and nectar. So if you do want to grow bedding plants, if you do want to, fill gaps in the border with nice flowering perennials or annuals, then think of things like cosmos, think of things like sunflowers, where again you can see the centre of the flower, but it's something that bees and butterflies know how to feed from in this country, and that will ensure that you get a nice colourful garden, but you can also feed pollinators. Now, Briar's breeches, Acanthus mollis, is an interesting one. It's native to the Mediterranean, where it's a really good bee plant. It can be quite invasive in gardens, so a lot of gardeners plant it and then realise they can't actually get rid of it. However, the interesting thing is that while it's a good bee plant in the Mediterranean, bees can come stuck in the plants in the UK. And this is because the bees in the Mediterranean are bigger and stronger. So the way Acanthus mollis works is it's got its nectar at the base of the flowers here. And so big bumblebees go in, they enter the flower, they push it open like this, and the weight of the bee holds this bit down so they can get inside the flower and they can access the nectar. And in doing so, obviously, they brush against the pollen and they take a bit of pollen away with them, and that's how the plant pollinates itself. But often a lot of our bees aren't quite big enough to back out of the flower again, and so they get stuck. So sometimes you might walk past a stand of Acanthus mollis and you might see dead bumblebees trapped inside these flowers because they just haven't been strong enough to exit the flower, and so they become trapped and die. This is burdock, which in itself is actually a really good pollinator plant. It's got these lovely thistle-like flowers that are really pink and attract lots of bees and other pollinators. But because of these really sticky, spiky flowers, bats can get their wings caught on them, and if they can't get themselves free in time, they can die. And I've actually found a bat with its wings stuck to burdock seed heads, and it was a very sad moment indeed. So this is something that I've stopped growing in my garden because I want to protect the bats. And there's plenty of other pollinator plants to grow. And lastly, the flowers to avoid growing in your garden are plastic flowers, which don't even grow, do they? I've seen bees and other pollinators fooled into thinking there's something here for them. I've seen them flying around, wasting energy, trying to land on these flowers, but realising there's nothing there. These leaves, which might normally be used by leaf miners, by leaf hoppers, frog hoppers, the leaves may be taken by leafcutter bees to line their nests. None of that can happen because it's plastic. The trend for plastic plants, plastic grass, plastic trees is the most dangerous thing for wildlife, because wildlife can't live there, it can't feed there, it can't do anything there. So don't grow plastic plants, grow real ones instead.